Thanks a lot. Well, Rune actually prepared my talk very well because you have mentioned that the Kyrgyz are traders. Yeah, this will be one of my first arguments that I wanted to bring across. Here's a little... louder? Yeah? Okay. So here's an overview of what I want to tell to you. The first step would be that I show you how the Kyrgyz evolved into a society of traders. From the 1990s on, not earlier, was not possible. Then I want to look a little bit at the Belt and Road Initiative, that you have also mentioned, but I want to contrast it with the Eurasian Economic Union, which is the project no one is talking about, but actually it turns out has been influencing Kyrgyz economy a lot more until this point than the New Silk Road or the Belt and Road, however we want to call it. And the final thing from my ethnographic data is I want to showcase some of the adjustments that have been going on, a turn to entrepreneurialism from trade, and the expansion of the economic services along the Eurasian value chains, how we could call them, so the crowding of the value chains with more actors. So I'll start with this, most of you are aware that if we talk about today's capitalism and trade in Central Asia, this started actually in China in 1978, with the opening up, and starting the construction of the socialism with Chinese characteristics, which is a decollectivization, the attraction of foreign investment, the privatization of state enterprises, lifting of price controls, and permit citizens to start their own enterprises. That's in very short. And those of you who have been working in China, I apologize. This is more or less the start of how a city like Guangzhou became the factory of the world, in the end. This larger development on the other side, was of course the end of the Soviet Union in 1991. And here we have to see that at different speeds and in different levels, there was a transformation from a command economy to market economies. Very similar processes, including privatization, reduction of state subsidies, and a retraction of price and currency controls. And what is very similar when looking at these two processes is that in the beginning they were perceived to be very chaotic, unregulated. In Russia and the former Soviet Union, we talked about a wild capitalism. And in China, I believe there was this saying of jumping into the sea, the experience of the new entrepreneurs, especially in the 1980s when they were exposed to capitalist practice. So this is the larger development. Within that development, Kyrgyzstan is very small. For those of you who do not know, it's a nation of 6 million, among very big neighbors, not only China and Russia, but also Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. According to the population, even Tajikistan is bigger than Kyrgyzstan. So they are basically the smallest, which is not unimportant, because being small also maybe introduces a necessity to be flexible, which we could see has been impacting Kyrgyz economic development a lot. And this development actually led Kyrgyzstan to become the regional trade hub for Central Asia, starting from the 2000s on, because especially after the 2000s, the goods and merchandise made in China arrived in Kyrgyzstan and they were re-exported. We have to be a little bit careful with all the numbers and so on, but I just want to say some of them. Very interesting here is if you look at the mirror statistics of the World Bank. The mirror statistics tell you what one country gives as an export to another, and on the other hand, what this other country declares as an import from the first country. If we look at it between China and Kyrgyzstan, the difference is factor 10. So 500 million exports, for example, from China to Kyrgyzstan, 5 billion exports from China to Kyrgyzstan declared, and Kyrgyzstan declares 500 million imports. The rest vanishes not only at the border, but along the value chains. And other than that, another estimate for Dordoy, the biggest market in Kyrgyzstan, was that about 80% of the goods that arrive in Kyrgyzstan are re-exported to the region. So to Russia especially, to Kazakhstan, those where there's more consumer power, yeah, so to say, because Kyrgyzstan simply is too small. So this re-export model was actually something in the 90s, starting from the 1990s, with which a lot of Kyrgyz citizens who were dispossessed after the Soviet Union, yeah, with lower salaries from being a teacher, yeah, from being, I don't know, a state employee, yeah, or having been working in a kolkhoz or sovkhoz, they actually started making a living from trade. Yeah? Not all of them succeeded. Yeah? Very important if you study economic anthropology not to forget the dark sides of what is going on. Yeah? You, of course, methodologically may be interesting. Usually talk to those who made it, yeah? Because those who did not make it are very difficult to find. Yeah? You would basically have to talk to everyone and ask whether they at one point had been maybe involved in trade. Yeah? Because maybe they had to stop at some point. Yeah? So Boris Petrik called this Kyrgyzstan a society of traders, yeah? Because it developed into this trade hub and a re-exporting scheme. What is interesting here, that is a very new monument that has been erected outside of Dordoy, the biggest market in Kyrgyzstan, in Bishkek, in the capital, only in 2018. And it's supposed to, well, give testimony to the fact that in the 1990s and still today, a lot of the economy of Kyrgyzstan is based on the shoulders of those, especially female traders, who had started in the 1990s. Of course, this is a very glorified picture here. Yeah, they were not as stylishly traveling, yeah, as depicted here, yeah, and with the sunglasses and. It looked quite different, yeah, during the 1990s and also in the 2000s, but it is, so to say, the symbol. Yeah, Dordoy is a symbol for the trade of Kyrgyzstan, and this is another symbol in front of Dordoy, yeah, for the importance of trade for Kyrgyzstan. Then I'll take the second step. I put two maps up for you. I will not say a lot about the Belt and Road because we have heard about that before. Yeah, maybe just two highlights. The one is that, of course, the focus in comparison to the Eurasian Economic Union, for which you see the map on the left, is that it's about infrastructure. Yeah. So the Belt and Road is about infrastructure investment. And if we talk about the Belt and Road in Kyrgyzstan, at this point we have to say that for regular people there is not a lot of effect. Yeah? For those entrepreneurs I will tell you about soon, they were not involved in Belt and Road projects. Yeah? There's economic analysis which says, for example, that actually the construction of roads, yeah, that could be tied to the larger Belt and Road project are financed by the Chinese government, are actually constructed by Chinese workers, but are not really improving the trade volume. Yeah? This is, I think, an interesting fact. The road exists, but it is not really. There's not really a big profit from the goods being transported faster than before, because maybe there's just a saturation of goods. Yeah. So this is something we can consider here. So if we talk about the Belt and Road in Kyrgyzstan, we could say that there is a danger of Kyrgyzstan ending up in the shadows of the Belt and Road. Yeah. Because the Belt and Road is moving north to Kazakhstan. Yeah? We talk about the railway, yeah, from China through Kazakhstan to Duisburg, Germany, Europe. Yeah? A place like Kyrgyz at the border between Kazakhstan and China is a lot more interesting for trade than Dordoy will be soon. Yeah? This is very different with the Eurasian Economic Union. Yeah? Here I want to give you some facts. Yeah, that was established in 2015. If you look at the map, it's a union of all former, not of all, but all of them are former Soviet republics. Yeah? In Kyrgyzstan also there's a joke going around, oh, the union is back. Yeah? Not referring to the Eurasian Economic Union, but the Soviet Union, implying also that the control is Russian control. Yeah? Kyrgyz government hesitated a lot and resisted a lot until they were convinced to join the Eurasian Economic Union, but now they are in. And for me it was interesting to see how that changed the economic practice, the economic landscape, and that is the thing that will follow on the next slides. In contrast to the Belt and Road and the infrastructure, the focus of the Eurasian Economic Union is on common institutions and on policy harmonization. So something very different, yeah, and with very different effects. Yeah, and I will tell you about this now. So what this basically meant, especially once Kyrgyzstan entered the Eurasian Economic Union, is the end of this import-export era that I have talked about before, and a changing of the economic landscape. Yeah? I want to highlight four processes that we can observe here. One is the formalizing. Yeah? So if in the 1990s you could still arrange, that your goods would be transported, yeah, for a train going from, for example, northern China to Novosibirsk, yeah, on the side you agreed with the train conductor, you could put your goods in and it was, so to say, carried along. Yeah? This is something that is not a practice today anymore. It's impossible. Yeah? There are international standards that a lot of the entrepreneurs that I have been working with have to comply with, for example, ISO standards. Yeah? Because if, I don't know, let's say an Azeri entrepreneur wants to buy a certain industrial equipment and he's working through a Kyrgyz middleman, and later on the Azeri entrepreneur wants to export to Europe, then of course this machinery has to fulfill ISO standards, otherwise the production standards are not met. Yeah? This is something very different to what we think about when we talk about wild capitalism. Yeah? The other thing is certain regulations. The most important one for Kyrgyzstan here is that after entering the Eurasian Economic Union with the others, there's a common external tariff. So all of a sudden, importing to Kyrgyzstan is as expensive or as cheap as importing to Russia. So the regional trade hub and being a bottleneck, yeah, is an option that is not existing anymore, yeah, for Kyrgyzstan. So this, of course, takes everything under, yeah, this old import-export trade model. Yeah. Then the second factor would be the institutionalization. Yeah. RKDF is the abbreviation for the Russian Kyrgyz Development Fund. Yeah? This is something that Kyrgyzstan was granted after they entered the Eurasian Economic Union, and it's basically a fund that is supposed to initiate new economic development in Kyrgyzstan that is non-trade. Yeah? Mostly this is manufacturing, yeah? This is processing, yeah? This is actually the attempt to return to a Soviet Union landscape of factories and production and industry and so on. Yeah. It is comparatively small. I think the whole volume is 2 billion, yeah, which is less than the Dordoy turnover in 1 year. Yeah. So just to put that into a perspective. Yeah. Another interesting institutionalization, yeah, is that Kyrgyzstan has introduced a business ombudsman, yeah, who is supposed to protect the business interest vis-a-vis the government. Yeah? That is necessary very much, yeah, if we just pop up the catchword corruption. Yeah? And interestingly, who was selected? The former British ambassador. Yeah? So this is an institution that I cannot report a lot about because it has not begun to work, but it was established, and it will be interesting to see how this is a new institution that is directing business in a certain way, yeah, in Kyrgyzstan. The third thing is diversification. Yeah? So there are new actors along these value chains that run across Central Asia or Eurasia. Yeah? If in the past these original traders of the 1990s, let's say they took their money, they took the calculator, they traveled to Xinjiang, yeah, or later on to Guangzhou, and without any language knowledge, you know, they tried to negotiate, just typing the numbers and the digits into the calculator. Yeah? Nowadays, you have people who are, for example, Kyrgyz business middlemen, yeah, who are fluent in Mandarin, yeah, who have been working as traders, have other experiences, and now are facilitating these kind of deals, yeah, between, let's say, a Chinese manufacturer from T-shirts to tractors, yeah, anything, and Russian-speaking clients, not only from Kyrgyzstan, but also from Russia itself, yeah, or any former Soviet republic. Yeah? So this is a new actor that has emerged, yeah, in the course of time, yeah, of the last, let's say, 10 years or something. Another actor, for example, I'll be talking about the actors later maybe. Then there is always also a new service orientation. Yeah, if before this example that I just gave, yeah, there was no service in between. Yeah, there was a direct link between a trader and a manufacturer. Yeah? Nowadays you have cargo companies, yeah, that are taking care, yeah, of some of the sending of goods, yeah, in between those locations. Yeah, you have in Kyrgyzstan all of a sudden the need to have a budget in your business plan for public relations. Yeah, if you want to reach a certain clientele, because the clientele in Kyrgyzstan has become middle class in terms of being knowledgeable about products, yeah, knowing about global brands, yeah, knowing about fashion trends or other trends, yeah. And so this increases the need, yeah, for everyone who becomes an entrepreneur to also take into account that you need services. Yeah, branding is another example. And if we want to summarize this new modus operandi, then we could say that there is a switch from this ad hoc informality, yeah, the example I gave with the train at the border, to something that we can call business literacy and accountability. Yeah, because if you want to receive a subsidized loan from the Russian Kyrgyz Development Fund, you need to file a proper business plan. Yeah? Of course, nothing that any trader, no matter how glorified in a monument in front of Dordoy, would have thought about in the 1990s. Yeah? So this is a development I think is very interesting. Yeah? So the adjustments, on the one hand, it is interesting, although not so important, that there might be a new direction of the trade, yeah, and how goods are exchanged. Yeah, if so far this picture that I gave, China-made merchandise travels through Kyrgyzstan to Russia. Nowadays we can see it the other way around. Yeah, Russian-made clocks or watches are arriving in Kyrgyzstan, yeah, because it's a single market. Yeah, eggs produced with heavy Russian state subsidies are cheaper than Kyrgyz local eggs. Yeah. So you can see that there's kind of a economic imperialism that has returned alongside the union. Yeah? But this is not maybe the most important aspect of it. Another one is that those who had been traders before now have started to work as entrepreneurs. Yeah? And Adil's story is interesting. I'll just show you the picture. That is Adil's shop. He's selling fabric, yeah. But before he opened this shop and the little processing factory behind it, he was a simple trader because he imported ready-made Adidas sports jackets from Turkey to Kyrgyzstan and then sold them to Kazakhstan. Yeah. But once Kyrgyzstan entered into the Eurasian Economic Union, this was very expensive, yeah, because a ready-made product is put through the tariff control very differently than if you just put through a fabric, which is not a ready-made product. Yeah? So he switched, and all of a sudden, nowadays, he's importing only the fabric from Turkey. He pays a fourth in the tariff, in the customs clearance, than before with the ready-made jacket. And for him, it's a very smart and rational investment to set up a local processing plant, and he has hired 50 people who are now manufacturing the Adidas sports jackets in Kyrgyzstan on the territory of the Eurasian Economic Union and exported to Kazakhstan without any tariff. This is, I think, a very interesting adjustment, yeah, from a trader to a real entrepreneur. Yeah? Then, going back, this new instrument, the Russian Kyrgyz Development Fund, I told you in theory about it. I want to show you now one example, which is this one. This is just outside of Kyrgyzstan, and it is quite a significant development for Kyrgyzstan if you look at it from the perspective of value chains. Yeah? Because before, if you produced, let's say, T-shirts in Kyrgyzstan, the cotton would have come from Uzbekistan. Yeah? So you import the cotton fabric from Uzbekistan and you are processing it in Kyrgyzstan. Yeah? With this investment supported by the Russian Kyrgyz Development Fund, Kyrgyzstan, or this entrepreneur in particular, he imports only the cotton thread from Uzbekistan. Not the fabric, but the thread. Yeah? So all of a sudden he has a very different business potential, yeah? Because he can now decide which pattern the fabric will have on his own, because he's not buying a ready-made pattern. So he can all of a sudden put the Kyrgyz pattern on the fabric. Yeah, he can decide the quality, yeah? Cheaper, more expensive, and so on. Yeah, and this is a very significant and new investment, yeah, for Kyrgyzstan because this was based, and that is, I think, also an interesting number. This was based on a $7.5 million loan, yeah, from this Russian Kyrgyz Development Fund that has an interest rate annually only of 4%, while the regular interest rate annually would be 20%. And when talking to this person, he made it very clear, I could not have made such an investment on his own. He was a businessman before. He had money. He invested 2 million of his own capital, yeah? But he would not have reached 9.5, yeah? And he would definitely have decided against this investment if he had to take a loan at 20%. Yeah? 0 minutes. That's true. -1 actually. But I'm almost done. So this is, I think, something very interesting. And the final thing I wanted to show you is the service orientation. Yeah, this is an advertisement for the Bishkek Investment Forum that has been hosted actually last week. And it is interesting for the fact that behind it is a business association called GIA, which translates as the Association of Young Entrepreneurs. And it's a new institution for Kyrgyzstan because it's actually a lobby organization, yeah, for business interests vis-a-vis the government, yeah, which has not been there before, yeah, and which people consider it necessary because the government apparatus is working slowly, they're corrupt because they're working on slow salaries. And so uniting behind the business association is a very new development. I want to just, if Susanne allows me, just highlight maybe 2 things that are I consider important for that. Is that what carries this particular organization is that there's also a patriotic sentiment in it. Yeah? That's what makes it attractive, aside from material success for those who are participating, because again, going to this small nation kind of idea, they say, well, in Kyrgyzstan we can produce for the world. Yeah? Actually, this fabric that I showed in the picture before, sorry, this one, he just sealed a contract with a German chain. Yeah? So he's in fact exporting this fabric, all the products he makes from it, to Germany. Yeah? So this is something that carries, yeah, with this patriotic Kyrgyz patriotic sentiment that we might be small, but we can still achieve something. The second one is that there's a social component to that, which I think is interesting, and that is that GIA unites behind some of the few very successful businessmen in Kyrgyzstan. Yeah? So they are not only a service agency in terms of providing a platform, yeah, as is advertised here, that gives business advice, yeah, that actually does also market research, but the members are those who are already successful. Yeah? And this convinces a lot of young entrepreneurs who are growing up in an environment where they are not trusting a lot of other entrepreneurs to join and to take part, yeah, in this association. And this is the end.